Hello Brain Shakers, welcome to the Brain Shakers Academy. We are looking at the absorption of the CSF. Now we have already done a number of videos on the production of the CSF, how it then flows, and now we want to know and understand how it is maintained at the normal limits of around 150 to about 270 mils at any given one time. So let's quickly dive into today's session and understand how that does happen. So we have a diagram here that we're going to use to explain the absorption process of the cerebrospinal fluid. But a quick recap on what normally happens or what levels you would want. We know that we want the cerebrospinal fluid to be around 150 to about 270 mils at any given time, because the production rate is therefore at 0.2 to about 0.7 mils per minute, culminating into about 600 mils to about 700 mils of that CSF. So this then entails that for about 4 to about 5 times on a daily basis, we have to change the CSF, and there has to be absorption of the CSF from the subarachnoid space, getting down into the durovenous sinuses, and then we eliminate it as the choroid plexus then continues to provide or produce even more of that CSF, maintaining the volume around that level of 150 to 270 mils. So the process of then absorption of the CSF is going to be facilitated by 3 well-known mechanisms. Now, the first mechanism that we're going to be looking at, where majority of the CSF is going to be absorbed, is what we're going to refer to as absorption through arachnoid granulations. So you will have arachnoid granulations here. Okay, so from arachnoid granulations, then we have also some minute channels. Now, these minute channels are channels that will then follow the Fila Olfactoria, or the olfactory nerve, which is the cranial nerve number 1, and then they will get through to the nasal mucosa. And then we also have another one, which is the glymphatic system. Okay, so basically those are the 3 main methods that we are going to look at in the process of absorption of the CSF. To start with, let's look at the arachnoid granulations. So when we were looking at the production and the flow of the CSF, we did make mention that where the dura mater, or the meningeal layer of the dura mater, makes a fold, it creates space for the durovenous sinuses. And if we look at this one, so if we do make a cut, on this one, and say we cut here, and that then we will zoom it into this. That's exactly what we are going to be appreciating here. So you have the pia mater, you have the subarachnoid space, then you have the arachnoid mater, and then on the outer part you will have the subdural space, and then the meningeal dura mater. And all this is going to be that part which we are calling the superior sagittal sinus, and then you have those arachnoid granulations. So they are going to appear more or less like micro villi, where they are going to increase their surface area as well. And within these granulations, now there's going to be a flow of that CSF, meaning that the CSF that is flowing in here will also be continuous in these surface villi that are formed with those granulations there. So you have the CSF flowing in that direction, and then gets access to the durovenous sinuses. So these are the arachnoid granulations that will then create a valvular mechanism. Now, the valvular mechanism that is created here is more of the use of valves, meaning that it will allow the movement of CSF into the durovenous sinuses, while preventing the backflow of blood into the CSF that is also in making sure that we are maintaining the efficacy of the blood-brain barrier as well. So the arachnoid granulations now, they are the ones that allow the movement of the CSF into these durovenous sinuses. So there's going to be diffusion of that CSF into the venous sinuses, and then it will be taken through the venous system. Now I look at the venous system in another separate video, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of that. That is the first one, and you're going to find a number of these arachnoid granulations more on the superior sagittal sinuses and on the transverse sinuses, because that is where you find more of those protruding granulations there. So the second method in which you're going to eliminate CSF from this arachnoid space is going to be through the minute channels. Now you have a bone that we refer to as the ethmoid bone. So the ethmoid bone is responsible and houses also the nasal cavity, around the nasal cavity there. Within the ethmoid bone, you will have these minute channels that are emanating from the subarachnoid space and move towards that ethmoid bone by following what we call the Fila Olfactoria. Okay, that is just close to the cranial nerve number 1, which is the olfactory nerve, and as it flows towards that following the Fila Olfactoria, then it will get that CSF to be deposited into the lymphatic channels under the nasal mucosa. So that is another way in which the CSF is going to then be gotten rid of the subarachnoid space. Then you have a third system in which you are going to get rid of this CSF out of the subarachnoid and maintain it in the normal levels, and this is what we are referring to as the glymphatic system. Now the glymphatic system, we did make mention when we were looking at the different meninges that the brain tissue and the pia mater are kind of separated by a tiny subpia space that is a function of the astroglial cells. Now, with the glymphatic system, what is going to be happening now is that there will be a movement of the CSF. So you will find that the CSF, a small amount of the CSF will gain access because of the astroglial cells there. It will gain access into the nervous tissue, which is the brain tissue itself. So it will gain access into the brain tissue, and as an equal amount of interstitial fluid will move from the brain tissue into the CSF. So once it gets into the CSF, then that interstitial fluid will then travel with the CSF and then be gotten rid into the durovenous sinuses. So it means that a tiny amount of that CSF can gain access to the brain tissue through that glymphatic system. So basically those are the main three ways in which you would be able to maintain the levels of CSF around 150 to about 250, 270 mils. So you have the arachnoid granulations through which most of that CSF will actually leave the subarachnoid space into the durovenous sinuses, and then you will have the minute channels that travel by way of the Fila Olfactoria to the cribriform plate in the ethmoid bone, and then depositing all that CSF into the lymphatic channels under the nasal mucosa. And then the third one basically is just going to be the glymphatic system facilitated by the astroglial cells. Now, if you found this particular session helpful in understanding the absorption of the CSF and how the levels are going to be maintained around 150 to 270 mils at any given time, then don't hesitate to drop me comments in the comment section, give the video thumbs up, and also head on to the YouTube channel and subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.